Thank you for joining the Making a Statement podcast. I'm Tori VanCura-Rutland, the Chief Growth Officer of HC3 and your host. This is our fifth podcast, and today's topic is going to focus on the digital adoption for bank statements and notices that bankers and credit unions seem to have. And right now, one of the things we noticed at HC3 is that adoption is challenged, increasing it beyond a certain percentage within these institutions. And so with me are two great guests from HC3. Our Chief Technology Officer, Bob Allen, is joining us, and he brings a lot of great talent, expertise, and knowledge to HC3. And Bob, I'd love for you to just give us a little background on your work experience.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Tori. Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here. Kind of a brief rundown of my history kind of in this area. Looking back a few years, many years, more than I'd like to say. I started, I got to Jefferson City, Missouri, where I'm at right now. I left the Navy to come here and actually started a check imaging company with some other people. And so I was a co-founder of a pretty successful check imaging company called Summit Financial Solutions. In that company, I basically did a majority of the programming and really built that program up to where it became lucrative to sell. So we actually ended up selling that company to one of the cores that we're all familiar with, CSI. They purchased Summit as basically their check imaging arm, which in that time period, a lot of the cores were doing that at the time. So it made sense for them, made sense for us. So during that time period, we built that company up. I gained a lot of industry knowledge of banking as a whole, check imaging, which touched a lot of areas of the business, capture the teller line, doing the proof of deposits, your non-post, repost, that whole banking process we learned a lot about. And so I gained a lot of knowledge in that area, building that company up. So at a certain point, I got high enough in the company where I can no longer code. And so they kind of took that out from underneath me. And I don't know if anybody that knows me well at all knows that I've lived to code. And so I called up a friend of mine at AutoMail and basically asked him if they were looking for any coders. And he said no, but for you, come down and talk to us. So I went down the next day. By lunchtime, I had a new job. It was quite interesting. So I went to work for AutoMail just as a coder for about 12 years. And then that's when, in the last about a year ago is when HC3 went through the acquisition of AutoMail. And so, I transitioned over into the HC3 world as a programmer, a director actually, and over the AutoMail group. And then our current CTO left the company, in which I threw my hat in the ring and had to interview with everyone. And so that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at today. So I'm the Chief Technology Officer of HC3, and that's kind of a quick rundown of that.
Thank you. Well, you have brought like so much to HC3 with your history, just your knowledge of banking and the systems that run banking systems that I don't think we even understood the level of expertise we were gaining when during the acquisition. It was such a great gift to one, have this great human, and then two, to gain such insight and knowledge. So it's my favorite thing I think that I've learned about you is that, I thought I was a great baker, but you are like a master cake baker. I feel like one day I'm going to turn on the TV and you're going to be on one of those like competition shows. So I have to ask, can you tell us a little bit about that and how you got into it?
Yes, absolutely. I don't really put myself in that level. I did get pretty close. I don't know. But it all kind of started by accident, which a lot of things do. I went to go pick up a cake at a local bakery here in Jefferson City for my daughter's birthday. I think she was 13 or 14. Well, anyway, I just was having a conversation with what I didn't know at the time was the owner of the bakery, and just expressed a little, interest in baking myself. And she's like, "What are you doing tonight? Or what are you doing Friday night? What are you doing Saturday night?" I was like, I don't know why. And so she basically invited me to come into the cake shop on a Friday or Saturday night, basically 7, 8 o'clock at night. I didn't know this at the time, but she worked till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes. So I would go to the bakery about 7 p.m. Fridays and Saturdays and just sit with her and bake all night. And Jefferson City is the capital of Missouri, but it's also a pretty little town. And we have a nice downtown area, and they have the whole window, shop. And so her bakery had a nice little window area. So when she would make cakes, she would go up in the window. And so I did that. I got up in the window and made some cakes and really kind of just was enjoying it. And, that whole downtown area was great because 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, you think nobody's around. People would come in and just sit and talk and have coffee with her, and we'd be baking cakes. And it was just a phenomenal experience to go through. And then she left that area and moved on. And then basically, I didn't want to stop. So friends of mine kept hitting me up for cakes. I was like, okay. So then I kind of started doing it out of my house. And then someone suggested that I put on Facebook. So I did that too. So I actually have a Facebook page. If anyone's interested, it's Bob's Cake Shop. I haven't done it for a few years, so they're a little bit dated, but yeah, there's a few of them out there that I'm very proud of.
Awesome. I was just talking about, checking like the kind of butter you use and kind of, and one day I'm like in a meeting with Bob. He's like, let me just show you my cakes. And he's like showing me on his phone. And I suddenly was like, yeah, that puts my homemade stuff like to shame. Like mine look like, maybe a 15-year-old Girl Scout did them. Like there's some technique there, but not quite to that level.
It's a lot of work and a lot of
Yeah.
energy. There's one of them in there that it took me a week to make.
Wow. Oh my gosh. All right. Well, I could talk about this for a while, so I'll refocus. And so our other guest today is Jennifer Deaver. I've not forgotten about you. She's our director of sales and partnerships at HC3, and actually is out in the field quite a bit, listening to bankers and talk about some of these challenges. So I'm so grateful to have you again on the podcast. And if you would just tell our guests just a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
Well, first of all, I'm never going to show Bob anything I've baked because mine are very elementary and certainly not at the same level as him. So I have been in the sales and marketing industry for about 28 years now, and specifically went into the banking vertical focus about 5 years ago. Been with HC3 for a little over a year now. So the last several years, I've been very focused in the statements, notices world, everything that HC3 does. So,
well, I have to ask you. So, you've got a daughter who's, how old is she now? Is it 14?
he's 14.
14. So I noticed on your Facebook, you guys have been very busy with volleyball lately. And what does that look like? I have a son. I don't have a daughter, but what does that look like when they get to that age? What's the commitment like? What are you guys doing?
So right now we are finishing up a travel volleyball team. The season started in December, and it will end in 2 weeks with nationals down in Orlando. So it's a lot. It's practices twice a week for 3 to 4 hours, and then tournaments pretty much every other weekend. I think the furthest we've gone is Chicago or Louisville. Both of those were far, and then Orlando's will be the farthest down in nationals, and it's really cool that they got chosen to go down there and compete. There will be probably, I think, 200 different teams competing across the span of the entire week for their age bracket.
It's crazy. So that's a lot of travel. And you're just in Atlanta. Was it this weekend?
Yeah, we were in Atlanta this past weekend for 3 days. So
I feel like, moms and dad, you guys we don't get days off. Like you're on at work, then you're on the weekend. I sense you need like your own vacation coming up soon or something.
yes, I'm gonna have to talk to my boss and see if I can get one of those.
She's out for a while. So, well, before we jump into our topic, something I'd like to do with our guests is just ask a couple of questions around what HC3 does, which is statements, and just kind of ask as we get into this topic. When is the last time like either of you changed financial institutions? Do you recall? And if so, why did you leave one?
Go ahead, Jennifer. Go ahead.
I was actually with this same financial institution for 20 years and just changed about 2 months ago to a different one. And the reason was the level of customer service. It was frustrating to me. We kept having issues pop up with different things. We have our auto loans through the same institution. We have everything through this one financial institution. And it was just became harder and harder to get in touch with a person. And then when there was a challenge, you could never find anyone, especially on the weekend, because they're not open on the weekends. They didn't have any sort of customer service. Like a lot of institutions now have gone to some sort of a chat bot feature functionality, and the institution we were with didn't have that. So I was out of town one weekend and had some challenges with our bank that we were with. And that next Monday morning, the first thing I did was call and change to a different financial institution.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
that's key. You've got to meet your customers where they are. Sorry, Bob, go ahead.
oh yeah. So I was just gonna say I personally just went through and added 2 new banks recently, and one was a credit union. So I now have a full digital bank, a credit union, and a local bank as all 3 of my different banking to cover all the different needs. But basically, we had the traditional local bank here in town, and they did fine. But once again, kind of like the experience that Jennifer had, we just started having trouble with customer service as a whole, and then their rates just couldn't compare to what we could get at the credit union. So we moved a lot of that over to the credit union, and then I went with a digital platform that does they don't even have a location. And so for like investing and such, to keep that kind of segregated from my normal banking. So that's what I've done recently.
Interesting. Okay. So how do you guys receive your statements? I have to ask, is it paper statements, digital, some combination?
I am all digital.
All right. She's all in.
My family's a combination of both.
Okay. Well, it's a good topic to segue because we're definitely needing to figure out what's going on in the world today. Because, we talk to a lot of bankers about, gaining, like helping them increase their e-adoption for their e-statements or their digital adoption. They have all these fun words: digital statements, e-statements. But at the end of the day, however, they're electronically accessing those statements and notices. And so I'm just curious to kind of dig into there. Like what is the average adoption rate for between credit unions and banks for e-statements?
So a little bit of research I've done on this. I know we have our own local numbers that we like to use, but I know that just banking in general, looking at some of the more broad scoped, larger banks in general, they're sitting at about 30% for mail and then about 40% digital. I know that what we've seen is pretty close to that internally. And then another basically statistic to throw out there is what I've been reading. It's been going like this for years, but basically a lot of people like to have both. And so, these banks and FIs are wanting to save money by going to digital. But what's happening is they're actually kind of spending both now because they have to pay for the digital side and the paper side.
Yeah, I think that's what Bob said is really true. In talking with the financial institutions like we do out in the sales world, we hear that a lot. And obviously digital is not where anybody wants it to be. I think every financial institution right now has a goal to increase their digital adoption. But the paper statement is still very much alive for some people. I think a lot of that is driven by demographics, as well as sometimes by the size of the institution and what they have behind in terms of manpower to put behind that push to get people to adopt digital.
You guys are both mentioning kind of customer service challenges, when you were talking about recently adopting new financial institutions. So it seems important for bankers to understand that this is a customer service piece. I know a lot of times it's checking a regulatory box, but you're filling some sort of need for a customer. So it's kind of interesting. The stats that I've seen is that a lot of banks have a little bit lower digital adoption, somewhere between 30 and or so, and then credit unions have a little bit higher, not much, but they can be upwards of 40% adoption. Is there anything that you guys think they're doing differently, or what successes are credit unions having over banks?
I think that typically with credit unions, they seem to have more of a focus on the overall end user experience than banks do. So they sometimes are able to create more consistent customer experiences throughout every step of the journey, from when a person just first becomes a credit union member, and then throughout the process of as they're adding accounts, they seem to promote more loyalty than some of the banks do that I've seen and talked with. So I think that is one of the big key differences between the two. And just as far as like how they see the use of a statement, they use it really more consistently for communication and for making sure that the customer has that streamlined experience throughout every touch point that they might have with their members.
Yeah, one thing that I've noticed just through personal experience is that the credit unions are usually typically a little bit smaller, a little more personalized service, just as a service, institution in general. But what kind of drove my family to start using the credit union was some of their incentives. If I use my credit card, 16 times in a month, I gain, I believe it's 4%, match on those numbers. But that also means I have to go with a specific account. That specific account does not have paper attached to it. So I want that 4%, and to get that 4%, I opt to go digital with that. So, there's pros and cons with everyone, but I think that the credit unions have a little bit better way to put that carrot in front of you, I think, than the banks, traditionally do.
Interesting. So what do you think that, whether they're a credit union or a bank and they're struggling to grow e-adoption particularly, what are some steps that you guys, what things have you seen be successful out there, helped kind of incentivize or move the needle a little bit?
I think for myself, and when we're out in the field and we're at the conferences and talking to different bankers and credit unions, there's kind of 4 key areas that kind of come up consistently, and that is convenience. So making it as convenient as possible for their customers and their members to access everything digitally, but also to even initially sign up for the products and services through their online portals. And then that ease of use. So just really making it easy to do everything. And then personalization and security. Those are kind of the 4 key areas that I hear when I'm out talking with people that pop up consistently.
Yeah, I think that getting to know your customer, and this is not just in this industry; it's every industry right now, but really plays a big role in moving people into that digital, because that's what they want, because it will drive their costs down. So in order to do that, you really have to understand your customer and know that not everyone's going to adopt it. I mean, there's people that are stuck in the ways that won't go one way or the other, and that holds true for digital and paper as well. There's some people that only want electronic, so you have a little bit of that middle ground that you get to play with, and that's really what you need to focus on. In my opinion, is kind of trying to target market those people that are on the fence, and seeing what do they need, what are they using their statement for. Will digital assist that in any way, shape, or form? And if so, you need to get that in front of them.
I really like that point, because I mean, it's understanding why people are using the statement. So understanding what job is it doing, what is it serving for that end user, that customer of the financial institution, and then seeing, does the digital experience offer that, or is there something else that needs to be done? And I still think, like, as you guys both mentioned, that sometimes there's going to be a need for print, and I can think of times when I've really needed a printed document and I didn't want to go print it myself. Like, having that actually at my fingertips was a customer service aspect that my bank delivered to me. So again, it's like understanding some of these needs. And one of the things I think you guys are sort of bringing to light is that there's an ROI in the customer service side of it, by understanding and having these options, and not, I think we hear a lot of times the carrot or the stick with like driving digital adoption, charging people for statements or giving them a credit if they adopt something. those are things that maybe work in the short term, but they're not maybe relationship builders for the long term. I think the tool you mentioned, Bob, where you were getting that return rate at a higher, like that's a good long term carrot. That's something that keeps giving. That's a really good investment, and it feels like a good customer relationship. But there's still going to maybe be need for print, and you're going to have to kind of figure those out. So those are really amazing points. Should when banks are looking at changing their online bank solution, should e-statements be part of that evaluation? Because a lot of OLBs don't do that. So it suddenly calls in, like, should that be part of their evaluation?
Yes, I believe so. I believe that we're hearing a lot of talk recently is that they really want the banks want their digital and their print to look the same, exactly the same, not similar, exactly the same.
Yeah.
And so that is a good point to discuss, is that really your digital has an opportunity to jump out at your customer and be very visual, and so you could do the big color on the digital side, and then maybe lower it down for the print side to maybe save a couple dollars. But in the end, it's the same logos, same, everything looks exactly the same. And I think that's at least what I'm hearing, is that a lot of these banks really want that to be the same experience, no matter how they get their statement.
Definitely. I think that creating that consistent customer experience through both channels is really key. And that's what we hear as well. In talking with prospects and clients, that's something that they've all been struggling to achieve. And I think that's something that they're always looking for. And I definitely think if they're evaluating a new online banking platform or looking at doing anything different, they need to evaluate everything that goes along with that. Because again, it's all about keeping their end user experience front and center when they're making those decisions.
It's funny that, brick and mortar used to be this sort of central thing for everybody, and now it's sort of this digital storefront. And so I think a lot of our bankers, like when we talk to clients, are surprised at how much touches online banking, because it started out and it was smaller things and these things, and it's just gotten slowly bigger and bigger. And I think that's also a challenge to look at. It is such a massive part of their data and money workflow for their customers. It's a lot, and this is this niche little piece, but it is very important, especially when that end user goes in and they need to access that document. Like, we all have that momentary need. When you need something from your bank, you want it that instant. That's why you go online and you don't go on site typically. So Interesting. Well, for people listening, particularly our bankers and fintechs, what would you recommend they take away from today's discussion?
I think it's really important for them to have that really good understanding of what their clients are using statements for. To your point of, what purpose does this statement serve for your clients? Because that story is going to be different for every financial institution. It's going to vary amongst the different demographics of who they serve. So I think it's important for them to understand that. I also think it's really important for them to educate their own staff around all the features and benefits of why they should be talking to their customers about the benefits of going digital. And then also, once they have that solid understanding of why their customers are what they're using those statements for, figuring out like what's their strategic plan so that they can map the customer journey throughout any experience that they might choose.
Yeah, and what I would say is, kind of what I've touched on already, which is you're going to have your paper statements for a certain demographic and certain people, and not even demographic, just certain people love paper statements, and they will always be that way. You cannot change their mind for anything. And then you're going to have the other end of the spectrum, which is only digital, because they don't care about paper. They may not even go home very often to even check the mail. So you're going to have both extremes. And so, really you need to focus on that middle ground of people that really could go either way on the paper or the digital. I think that the new generations that are coming up are obviously leaning more towards the digital. And so that's going to eventually grow in that area just, naturally. But, if you're really trying to push to make digital happen, I think you really got to focus on the customer service side and see what people are using it for, why they're logging on, what they can gain by logging into the system to actually see them digitally versus the paper. And a big point maybe, what you were just talking about, Tori, which is, I want to look at this now, and I don't want to wait 3 days for my paper statement to show up through the mail. So
Yeah, and I mean, you guys are making some good points here about just there's bankers. Well, we don't always know why people look at statements. It's they're doing some either personal business or small business or commercial, what have you. But there's some need it's trying to fill, and I feel like what bankers don't understand, and even fintech folks, is that they don't value statements because they don't maybe have to for whatever reason. But there is a moment or a need or a time when people do need them, and you've got to talk to those people and understand their needs. And I tell this story every once in a while, but it's, I talked to a bank at a trade show once, and they're like, we keep trying to increase digital adoption and keep trying to increase, and we just can't. And they're a very rural bank, and they were telling me like how much they were pushing, and they did, get $5 for your account here if you enroll, and then they did that great adoption, and then the next month it all went back because there wasn't $5 the next month, and it wasn't a continual benefit. And then they've tried the sort of stick aspect of, we're going to charge you for your statements, and that didn't really move the needle. And they finally talked to some people, like they actually talked to their customers, and they realized that one of the main things that drives all of technology is power, electricity, and they have a lot of power outages where they are. They have a lot of times where the only thing you can rely on is that mail will come, sometimes eventually, but it will arrive, and they don't need to power anything up to do it. And so that was one of those, it's a niche story, but I think if people, again, talk to their customers and they understand what that end user is trying to get out of a statement, whether they see it digitally or printed, they'll understand it. And at the end of the day, it's a customer service touch point, right? So it's that customer service aspect of you're helping your customers make some sort of progress with their finances. So that's not the place to maybe skimp, or to skip. So even though we don't always value it because we're in technology and we can see all the things, doesn't mean our customers don't value it. And I think that's a really key note too. So thank you guys for being on. I'm now hungry for cake. I will not be playing volleyball anytime soon. You can't see me. I'm only 5 feet 1 inch. You would not want me on your team. But thank you guys for spending time with us. And for our listeners, thank you so much for listening today.
Thanks, Tori.